Good evening, everybody. My name's 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. If you've never been here before, thank you for stopping by and giving my page a little bit of your time and a little bit of your energy. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a case that echoes the IDAHO4 case. And I ran across this article and I thought I'd present it to you guys and see what you guys think when it comes to the similarities and the differences in this case. So let me go ahead and start reading this. This is an interview by the Independent. The title says, "I lived through an attack similar to the Idaho murders. We must defend the survivors." Why I've been so adamant about supporting the surviving housemate in the Idaho murders case. This was written Tuesday, January 17, 2023. And there is Alana Zabel. It was an amazing, fun, vibrant summer in 1992. I was living in a 3-leveled house off a campus from the University of Buffalo with 5 of my Chi Omega sorority sisters. Mine was the front room, a converted patio. The original entrance door was sealed shut and drywalled over so you wouldn't know that from the inside. Our partying continued into September, with constant late nights out at the bars until they closed at 4 a.m., followed by sleeping in every weekend. One Thursday evening, we all went to the Steer, a local bar within walking distance of our house. Around 10 p.m., I offered to walk my friend home if we left early. She turned to me, rolled her eyes, and said, "Elena, I'm from New York. If something were going to happen to me, it would have happened to me by now." Regardless, I grabbed a friend and we trailed 50 steps behind her. Then I saw a man standing with a bicycle across the street from our house watching us. I didn't think any more about it and went back to the Steer. The next night, we all went out again. We drove to downtown Buffalo, where we sludged Jägermeister, laughed, and listened to music before deciding to go to a fraternity party not far from our home. The same housemate who left early that night before decided to skip the party. Since we had only brought one set of keys, she agreed to let us in when we each arrived home. We were getting increasingly hammered. Jägermeister mixed with beer. So not long after getting to the party, Christian left. I stayed a little while longer, somehow finding a second wind. Around 1:30, Peggy and I decided we would go to PJ Bottoms, another local hotspot for UB college students. But we'd have to stop by home first, as my fake ID was in Christian's purse. The side entrance from the driveway had 3 options: downstairs, second level, or upstairs. Donna, who lived downstairs with Kristen, let me in while Peggy waited in the car. Kristen gave me my ID and we left. I never went up to the second level, the floor I lived on with Emily, Carrie, and my other housemate. After a couple of hours at PJ Bottoms, Peggy and I called it a night. At 3:30 a.m., she pulled into the driveway at our house to drop me off before waiting until I got inside safely. For 15 minutes, I rang the doorbell, kicked the door, and screamed my housemate's names. Yet, no one let me in. Peggy got out of the car and pointed to a bathroom window open on the second level. She laced her hands together and boosted me up to it. I noted the screen laying on the floor, so I put it back and locked the window. There was an odd smell and some wet towels in the sink that continued into the hallway. I saw my housemate's door cracked open and I called her name, but upon hearing some heavy breathing, I assumed she was with her boyfriend. I went down to the kitchen and let Peggy inside to confirm together that the house was safe. Peggy left and I went to my bedroom. About 15 minutes later, as I began to doze off, I felt someone enter my room. I lifted and turned my head, but I didn't see anyone. Seconds later, I heard the front door shut and assumed that someone had come home. I then fell asleep. Around 9:30 a.m., Carrie came into my room asking why the heck the house smelled so bad. She asked me if I had vomited the night before. I brushed her off, remembered the Jägermeister, telling her I had not. She returned 10 minutes later, same thing with more insistence. Carrie, I didn't throw up last night, so she left again. The third time, Carrie said she couldn't wake our housemate. We both went into her room and found her laying on her back with her eyes closed. Carrie took her pulse and I shook her feet and legs while screaming her name. She was not responding. I ran to the kitchen to call 911, reporting that my roommate had choked on her vomit. I then proceeded to make one of the most challenging phone calls of my life, letting her parents know something was wrong. When the paramedics arrived, I followed one as they approached the room and stepped backward, causing me to jump. Holy shit, look at all this blood. The room instantly filled with red. The mattress was 3/4 soaked with blood. The liquid I saw in her hair and on her face turned red. The walls were streaked with red. Everything changed. My mind began racing as to who, what, how, faster than I could process the thoughts, compounded with emotion never felt before. All of my protective walls disintegrated, and fear overtook every aspect of my being. We were told that my housemate only had another 20 to 30 minutes left to live, which thankfully she did. It took several years for a suspect to be named, and it was the very first conviction in Eric County with DNA evidence as the primary link to the perpetrator. However, before that relief and closure, I spent the first year utterly tortured. A homicide detective working on the investigation became a close and frequent contact. When he first arrived at the house the day of the attack to ask me questions, he sat me down and said, "Listen," while he closed his eyes. "Listen, and the scene will talk to you. It will tell you what happened." I closed my eyes and sat there, almost meditating with this detective. My sorority sisters nicknamed me Holmes because I couldn't move on until I knew who had done this. I began my own investigations, likely to the annoyance of the officers assigned to the case, who I called with my hunches and suspicions. I couldn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes, I felt someone chasing me in the bathroom. As I stepped inside the window, the what ifs were shredding my sanity, as well as the guilt for not calling 911 sooner. To think that I slept yards away while she lay unconscious from being beaten unspeakably brutally. One thing that is important to share is the uncertainty over what happened is absolute mental torture for someone who has experienced a situation like this. That is why I've been so adamant about supporting the surviving housemates in the Idaho murders case. The similarities to what happened to me are jarring. From environment to timing to relationships to ages. We all went out the night before, both to a local fraternity party and local stomping ground bar for college students. Both incidents occurred between 3 and 4 a.m. and both found the main suspects based on DNA left at the scene of the crimes. Our attacker was a rapist who was stalking us, while the Idaho suspect is also said to have stalked his victims, who didn't know who he was. While I personally didn't see our attacker as one of the surviving Idaho housemates did, I'm sure that both she and her other roommates are devastated just the same. I remember feeling overwhelmingly guilt and paramount fear that I had done something wrong. I would also imagine that the what ifs are overpowering their minds as well, thinking, what if I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when he entered? And so on, as the mind works to process this the ungodly and horrific experience. I compartmentalized what happened, made myself adapt to situations where I felt unsafe. I never wanted to identify as a victim, so I didn't tell many people in my life about it. Yet, I eventually changed my life direction, finding a path, or perhaps it found me, as a yoga instructor, author, and sound healer, as a means to work out something I couldn't fully grasp. Reliving this 30 years later hasn't been easy as I continue to connect the dots. My advice to those surviving housemates and to anyone who has experienced a trauma like this is to take time to process their feelings by talking about them in safe environments with trusted people. Write about it, create artwork about it, dance it out, cry, scream, dedicate some of your creativity to the victims, to metaphorically keep their candles lit. We simply cannot let evil win by making us fearful, diminished, or unwell for the rest of our precious lives. Nothing can destroy love, ever.
Remarkably similar to Dylan as I look at the parallels. You were also 19 years old. You were also living in a house with 5 sorority sisters. What did you think when you heard about this case? Could you put yourself in Dylan's shoes?
Right away. And the more that evidence came out and the story came out, it just became chillingly eerie how similar it was.
Did the circumstance that I just sort of outlined make sense to you, given that you heard some unusual noise and chalked it up to, it's just the roommates. This is a normal house in a normal town in a normal life. And there's Dylan seeing a guy walk through the house. Maybe it was the DoorDash driver. I mean, yuck, but murder?
A little bit. Also, I was boosted up through a window that the attacker had broken in. So, it wasn't that I was home when he attacked and when he broke in. But so there are similarities. I didn't see the attacker. I just know that when I found my housemate the next day, the next morning, I didn't see any blood in the room. All I saw was liquid. I was trying to find a pulse and shake her. And when I called 911, just saying that my housemate choked on her vomit and I can't wake her up and she's unconscious. When the paramedics arrived, I was standing behind a paramedic and he announced, "Holy, look at all of this blood." And in that second that he said blood, the whole entire room filled. So I know that the mind does very tricky things when it is trying to keep you safe and keep you functioning and keep you in fight or flight, because that is the mechanism of the mind. So that is why I really empathize with what Dylan went through. We don't know the story. We don't know her history.
Yeah, explain that a little more for me. What happened that morning when you woke up? I'm just assuming you think it's a normal morning. You're knocking on your roommate's door. Take me from there.
Well, I came in through the window and the screen was out, so that was a little bizarre. And I went to my housemates, the only other housemate that what came home that night. There was 4 of us on that floor, and 2 didn't come home that night, so I was the only one that came home. I went to her door, which was ajar, and I heard heavy breathing, and so I thought, oh, okay. I called her name, she didn't respond, so I just went to bed. And my room was in the front of the house, was a converted old Buffalo home, which used to be the patio. So since this attacker came through the window, he assumed that was the exit. I'm in bed, just about to go to sleep, very intoxicated. and someone walks into my room, and I lift up my head, and no one was there. And 10 seconds later, the front door closed. Now, no one came home, so we know that's when he left. So that fear and that panic to this day stirs me. I didn't sleep really for a year after this experience, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw someone chasing me, and the guilt, and oh, what if I had called 911 sooner? So when then the reality of what had happened the next day occurred, the pieces just start coming together. Investigators start coming in. You're trying to figure out what happened. So I can really empathize really a lot with Dylan and what she went through.
If there was something that you could tell Dylan, and for that matter, Bethany Funk as well, because she was also there that next morning. If you could say something to those girls, what would you say?
What I would say is, what you resist will persist. And I wish that I had dealt and processed this sooner back then. I've said this on a couple other shows that this was a different age. No one came to my rescue and offered me therapy. And there wasn't social media that blew up our attack, big as this is. So people are experiencing more concern. So I just moved on with my life, whether that's good or bad. And I became a strong person, and that I chose to help people and serve. Now, re-experiencing this 30 years later, sure, there's a lot of pain. And I realized, wow, I wish I had processed it sooner, because I can connect the dots a little bit to things in my life that have occurred, probably because this was unprocessed. And that's how it works. So I encourage them to do the work, heal, take time, write, meditate, process this experience, make sense of it somehow emotionally and mentally, so that you can continue being a shining light in this life and honor your friends and help other people, because you have a reference point that most people will never have.
Elena, I only have 5 seconds left, but I just want to ask if you're going to make an effort to reach out to them at some point down the road when they're able to speak, to help them process, being that you've been through this.
I have sent a message, so they have my contact. If they need anything, I'm absolutely here, however I can help.
Well, I'm so thankful that you shared this tonight, and so clearly. You're a remarkable woman. Thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it. Thank you for. There is still one big unanswered question hanging over the Idaho murder case, and that is why. If Bryan Kohberger really is the killer, why? Why did he do it? Right now, it appears there is only one person in the world who knows the answer, and Kohberger ain't talking. But there might be a way for the rest of us to retrace the steps that led him into that cold Moscow jail cell. A series of posts that were found online, some of them really disturbing, just might have been written by Kohberger when he was a teenager. Here's an example from 2011 when he was 16. It reads, "I see a large intensity of black, yellow, white fuzz. It makes my mind fizzle, and I can barely keep in the bounds of reality. It is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me." Dozens and dozens of posts like this were written on a site called Tapatalk, in a forum for people who believed that they were suffering from a condition called visual snow syndrome. News Nation has not been able to independently verify that these are Kohberger's early posts, but there are strong indications that they are. And I'm joined now by the two people who found them. Lauren Mathias is a reporter who's been following this case very closely, and John Mathias, her husband, is a clinical and forensic psychologist who's done a deep dive into what the posts might mean. Together, they host the Hidden True Crime podcast. And welcome to both of you. Lauren, how did you make this discovery, and how did you link it to Bryan Kohberger?
Yeah, it was the Hidden True Crime team that did this together. And there was a verified email address that we used that uncovered these writings from 2011. The post, the photo looks to be a side-by-side of Bryan. The username is an email that he used, as well as his rapper name. He did some raps online, and he confirms his own birthday and a relative's address, as well as living in Pennsylvania. So things do seem to add up, as well as the hundreds of pages that we have poured over reading. Everything matches up to look like this is Bryan Kohberger writing as a 16-year-old boy.
And there's like an array of writings. You say hundreds and hundreds of pages. That's just remarkable to start with from a teenager. But this went from 2009 to 2012, I think ages 14 to 17, John, and just sort of your overall impressions of the body of work as you went through it.
I think there's a couple pieces here that are most relevant. There's a couple pages that really kind of speak to his mental state at the time, but I think the overall picture that emerges here is this is a very troubled adolescent with many mental health issues. In fact, there's so many symptoms that he identifies, it's hard to know where to start.
I mean, it's sad and scary, sort of all at the same time,
Yeah.
to hear that, because you think of a teenager suffering, but then you think
Right.
of the person we're talking about, and it's hard to feel any sympathy at all if he's indeed the killer. Lauren, in 2009, the posts were pretty short. But then in 2010, they start to get longer. They're more confessional. They don't talk so much about his visual snow condition, whereas, it's a physiological situation where you see, a snowy outlook on life, basically. But these ones were more about his childhood and his life. Let me read this one. I can't remember anything recent or anything from childhood. Now I am just a blank soul living in the now. My mind is never not on visual snow, and I always wonder what a normal person would be doing while I sit there and suffer. This whole thing has made me crazy. I feel like my life is pointless because people can think about times with parents, childhood, memories, and be happy, and I won't be able to. Do we know, Lauren, if he ever got any help for this, if he saw a doctor, if anybody reached out to him and, tried to treat him?
We don't know what medical help he got. We do see that on these posts throughout these years, he tries different diets. He works really hard to try an array of diets, which actually confirms what a relative and friends have said about him being a very strict vegan or strict eater. It seems that he thinks that's the cause of what is called visual snow. And I think that, but again, it goes further than these physical symptoms, which is why I had to, take this to my husband, Dr. John Mathias, because it talks, as you mentioned, about demons. It talks about him feeling like a criminal in one point, yet he doesn't have a record. And that's why I said, John, like, you've got to look at these. What do these mean? This can't all be health issues, right?
Well, one of them, let's talk about that, John. In 2011, he's sort of latching onto this toxin theory. He says, I'm going to talk to a good neurologist about this, one that is very open-minded. I think this really is the cause. It might be the arteries being inflamed. It could hurt very bad. This seriously could be an issue that's undiagnosed. And then he goes on in 2011 and starts to tell people how to treat themselves. Like, he starts kind of telling other users what they need to do for their problems. And here's what he says: visual snow is caused by toxins in our body. These toxins range from yeast overgrowth all the way to fungus. I believe I caused my visual snow by too much toxins from the sweetener I used, and also too much caffeine chemicals. I also lived in a moldy house. When something is happening in your brain that shouldn't, chemicals are being released that shouldn't. These chemicals are released because we have toxins that our body doesn't want. It is going haywire. John, do we know if this might have been the start of him becoming a vegan to try to treat himself? Because it certainly looks like he's telling everybody to, eat plant-based diets and fruit juices to heal themselves.
It does seem like he became vegan around that time. This is also a time that's consistent with him losing a significant amount of weight. One point I want to make, though, about the visual snow is that, to me, one of the issues here is that he wants to attribute all of his problems and all of his mental health problems to the visual snow, right? And that's a big question mark about whether is the visual snow causing the mental illness, or is it the other way around? Is it the mental illness that's contributing to physical and somatic symptoms? Psychologists call that somatization. So I think it's a stretch to go from visual snow to the things he's talking about, the screams, the demons, right? Those are in the moral domain. Those are not in the medical domain. So he's taking some of these medical issues and he's trying to force them into this mental illness box, I think, to some degree, when in fact we're probably talking about something that has more to do with values and is more about moral judgments, like being a criminal, than it is about medical issues.
This one last line, he says, I feel like coming to terms could be a bad thing. It's ominous. Excellent work, both of you, Lauren Mathias and John Mathias. Thank you for watching.
Okay, we're drifting away from the surviving story to talk a little bit about the visual snow. I know it's probably been discussed in a lot of different areas, but I thought I'd dive in and try to simplify it so people can kind of understand it and understand the severity that it poses to individuals who express issues with it. That was quite informative. I really enjoyed that. It was easy to understand, easy to follow, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I just wanted to get on here and do a quick video. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. Y'all have an awesome night. See you soon.